Hi guys. So I was just sitting here working in my journal and it occurred to me that I don't often show this part of the process or talk about it. So I thought I would do a little bit of that just quickly today. Am excited today because the Fear the Walking Dead, which is the spin-off show from The Walking Dead, um, premieres tonight, and I'm a huge Walking Dead fan. I've been watching it almost from day one. I actually found it because there was a UK Big Brother um, zombie type of show that came out where um, they were supposedly like Big Brother contestants over in the UK, and they were in the process of broadcasting the show when everyone on the outside, that aren't locked into the actual house, were basically overrun with zombies and died. Um, and I watched that, and it was like a little mini series or something that was put out over in the UK, and I fell in love with that. I thought that was so funny because I was a Big Brother fan at the time, and that kind of got me started, really. And I found The Walking Dead after that. So I think it was somewhere in the first season when I ran into it. Anyway, um, long story short, that is why I'm just kind of sitting today, just kind of at my studio desk, not really working. It is a day off for me. It is Sunday, but at the same time, working in my art journal isn't working, so I'm not necessarily recording video for anything, and yet I am here creating art. So that's kind of why I thought I would go ahead and try to do this for you guys. So I kind of want to like give an insight into, I guess, how I develop pages. I kind of commingle both sketching and drawing as well as mixed media, and it's kind of hard sometimes to really get across how those types of pages kind of come about. So I was watching a video on YouTube, and the person in the video was sitting, kind of center of the video screen, and they had this elaborate, bright red, shiny bookcase in the background, and it was a little fuzzy, and I just started sketching that. So that's kind of where this came from. And then I was more focused on my main focus wasn't really on the things that were in the bookcase or anything like that. It was on looking at how the shelving, depending on um, where, based on where the camera was positioned, how the shelving looked inside of each little box. So that was kind of what started, and then I just threw the video was over by then, by the time I had this sketched out, so I just started putting just random things in there. So some of this stuff is real, like that's what the front of my cable box looks like, and that's a vase that I actually have hang or up on a shelf in my house. And this is my pencil case, but some of these things aren't real. They're just out of my imagination. And this isn't, something that was real for me to, have in my home in like a life drawing type of way, but it was on the video screen in front of me. So then, of course, I added my, a girl. I almost always draw a face in my journal pages. Not every single time, but most of the time. And that's kind of, like it comes from a combination of real things and yet imagination. And it really was just curiosity on being able to draw the proper view of each of these different shelves and whether or not I could get that perspective from that from what I could see from, the where the person was sitting, whether or not I could draw that. Now, for a lot of people, that might be no big deal, but perspective has always been something that doesn't not come easy for me. I've heard from a lot of people that it may very well have to do with my being left-handed. I'm not really sure, but perspective and getting it proper and getting proper scale sometimes, more the perspective than anything though, it has always been something that I have to practice. It's not something that came or has come easily to me. So I'm just drawing a little kind of beaded or detailed necklace on this girl, and this is not something from anything that is kind of real. I'm just doodling really, and I do that quite often as far as jewelry and adding little details and things like that. So I'm just going to finish this really quickly here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it at this point, mostly just because I'm trying to talk to you guys through it. And if I were doing this without a camera on, I would be going slow and taking my time. But at the same time, it depends on how much focus I want something to have. So if I don't want a particular piece to have a lot of focus, of a piece of the page, a part of the page, if I don't want it to have a lot of focus, then I won't spend much time. I'll just get rough details and let it go at that. But in this particular case, I do kind of want a little detail, but I'm trying to hurry. So again, like I said, this, the necklace isn't reality based in any way. Just make it up as I go. I really do love the look of jewelry. I can't make jewelry. I find it tedious with all the small parts and the wires and that type of thing. However, I am someone who likes to buy jewelry and I like to wear jewelry. And I love to draw jewelry, obviously. So let's see. I'm going for a little bit of balance in here, so I'm giving a little bit of a different value to some of these little strands of beads, which will help to make it more interesting than if I leave it as just, a raw sketch. Okay, so then the next thing that I kind of like feel like I want to do is I kind of want to add some a little bit of mixed media to it. And I usually start out, and I don't know, well, I guess I can't say that. To be honest with you, I don't have necessarily a clear rhyme or reason to how I start out. I started to say that I usually start out and then give you away, but to be honest, I start every page just different, just whatever I feel like in that moment. That's kind of what I start with. Now, lately, a lot of my work has been with this particular color palette that I'm about to show you. It is the flesh tone. It's all the same colors that make up the flesh tone video that I did, which I think I did for my test for my live stream. If you haven't seen those, there was one that was like 4 minutes long. It was literally just trying to see if I had everything connected correctly. The second one was, I think, in like an hour and a half long, and I talked about skin tone. I've lost all my paint rags. Oh, I have a kitty sitting on them. I stole one from her. And these are the same colors, basically. I'm actually not going to use that. It's mixing white. I'm just going to use some cheap white gesso. But I just want to get some of these colors out and play with them. Now, this is a color palette, to be honest with you, that I've actually painted in for quite some time. I've got quite a number of paintings and journal pages that use this color, these colors, with the one exception of being I generally have an aqua or a teal in the mix, but I'm not going to today. Today it's just going to be kind of warm colors, and then I'll use the Payne's Gray to cool some areas. So I've basically put out a cadmium orange, burnt sienna, Naples yellow, Payne's gray, and then I'm going to just use some cheap white gesso. Now this is just my art journal, and for me, I'm not real particular about the paints or the brands, or to be honest, even the quality, when I'm working just in my art journal. And I think there's some definite freedom in that if you don't worry too much about quality or what brand or what kind you're using. I think you get a little more freedom, and freedom is good when you're working in your journal, because your journal should be a place of inspiration for you, especially if, like me, you are a painter of any kind. I forgot to clip up my clip for my headphones, and the other day I was doing video and I muted it. Not realizing that I had pushed the button on the headphones. So I pulled out some scraps of paper. One of my most favorite things is to put metallic paint on my jelly plate and put it onto deli paper, and then use it later. I like little touches of metallic, but I'm not a huge fan of like an entire page painted in like the twinkling H2Os or anything. I think they're just a little too much for my particular taste. Mind you, that's just my taste. That means nothing in the scheme of things. So I'm going to cut this one into some little squares. Those scissors will take hours. I'm going to get a bigger pair. These will be faster. Although I think I have glue on most of my scissors right now, so I probably need to take a little time and clean them. So I'm just going to cut a strip out, and then I'm just going to use that strip and cut it into a few, so you can see how it has glue on it. Alright, so I just have 5 little squares there. Don't know why I decided to do the squares. It's not pre-planned. There's no pre-planning to pretty much any of it. Even when I'm just grabbing out like stuff like this, I just grabbed out a couple of things. I didn't necessarily even worry about color or anything like that, although I did see this and think I kind of want some warm colors. And then I also just literally opened my stencil drawer. I have a huge drawer filled with stencils. Opened it up, reached my hand in, grabbed a stencil out. That's the extent of the planning that I generally use. So the first thing I'm going to do, though, is put down a little paint. And I'm just going to use this stencil. And when I'm putting paint into a stencil, and I don't care if it's messy or how it works out, I generally like to use my fingers, and I will even get my hand wet, wet my fingers a little bit to kind of be able to get different lighter shades of the color based on what I have going on, the sorts of colors that I'm using. I don't care if I go over something else that I've drawn or anything like that, and I think that's really key to being able to do this and just kind of have fun with it. Now it's kind of stark as it is, so I'm just going to come in and mess it up with a little bit of white paint, and then I might go back over that. I'm actually going to get a baby wipe, which is probably one of my favorite tools. I'm just going to get a baby wipe, and I'm just going to kind of pull some of that off of there. And then my baby wipe now is covered with paint, so I'm just going to use that to put a little bit more down. And then just going to mix a little bit of the Payne's gray with some white. So I have a light, cooler, bluish gray. I love these muddy colors. I like this particular combination of colors used together. And, you know, they do get muddy and that type of thing, but I actually do that on purpose. I have intent when I'm doing that. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow. And if I feel like I can't move, oops, you can't see that. If I feel like I can't move it around as much as I want, or I want it to be thinner, then I will just kind of use the baby wipe like a paintbrush. And I'm just going to incorporate some more of the Payne's Gray and kind of let those mix. And you know, there are some people who don't like the appearance of mixed paints and making that little bit of what they like to refer to as mud. I personally happen to love that. I think that it is more true to what things look like in nature. And that's, I think, something to just kind of think about. Now you can use your baby wipe also just to paint. I do that a lot with ink and watercolor. And you really can kind of mush it around and make it any size you want it to be. All right, so I'm going to stop with this for a minute, and I'm going to save these little gold copper pieces for the very end. But first I am going to put down just a little bit of collage, and I'm just using fluid matte medium. You can use any brand. You can also use collage medium of any kind, whatever you like to use for glue. And I'm just going to use an angled brush. A flat brush would be fine. A round brush might be a little frustrating, trying to get the move everything around. I'm going to use this. Someone sent this to me in a package, and I think I'm going to use it kind of like a little top. Nope, it's too small now. So instead, I'm just going to place it down on my page. I don't like the look of it completely by itself. Not to say there's anything wrong with it, there's not. I just like to layer. I'm going to put something in here just so I don't glue the pages together. I've been doing that a lot lately. Gluing the pages together, that is. So I'm just going to stick that down, and then I'm going to add this other one. That's why I pulled out two that had some similar colors. I like the look of them of collage papers when they're layered together, and I think a lot of people, it's one of the reasons why I like to use tissue paper and paper napkins is because they layer so well. And I think a lot of people just kind of rip, you know, stuff and stick it down kind of separate, and I like it better when they're kind of merged together. I can't actually see down into that jar, so I just stick my brush down there and hope I've got the right depth. Okay, so then I'm actually going to take this little orange piece, orange and black that was there, and just kind of layer that with this. I kind of like that. But yeah, I do notice that people don't layer, for my taste anyway. They don't layer their papers enough. And I think that it's funny, we change over time, because when I first started out doing my mixed media art journal pages, I would put stuff down and then just completely obliterate it and paint over it. I rarely do that anymore, and I'll be honest, I only do it if I, for whatever reason, completely change my mind or I decide I hate what I put down. And it's okay to do that. I think a lot of people kind of say, oh, I meant to do that. And I think the truth is, we just changed our mind or we hated it. So I'll just be honest and say, I probably did it because I hated it. Or I completely changed my mind halfway through and decided to go in a different direction. But that's when I just completely obliterate them. So I've kind of made almost like a little border here, and I'm just going to, kind of go with that. And I've got some of this. This is just paper napkin, or well, it's paper towel basically. And once it gets wet, it's multi-ply. And when it gets wet, if you separate it before the inks and paints and things have a chance to dry, then it's kind of almost like a tissue paper. You get a variety of layers of it that you can use, and it's generally 2-ply, at least mine is anyway. So I generally get 2 pieces. So I try to get color, make sure that I have color on both sides before I pull it apart. But these are my actual working paper towels that are kind of created, I guess you would say, by my creative process. So they're not done like, I don't sit and design them, I guess is the word I'm looking for. They're not designed, in other words. So I'm going to add just one more piece down here just because I really want to carry. It's important, I think, to carry something all the way behind, if her hair is coming over it. So it's important that I carry it below that. I find anyway. So that's what I'm going to do. Just kind of carry it down. Okay, and then I kind of have this area is a little messy still right now, and I didn't make it a focal. I'm actually going to stop. Well, I take that back. I was going to stop, but I want to go ahead and put my little pieces on. So just going to take these and I'm just going to line them up somewhere, anywhere. It doesn't really matter. I am putting a matte medium over them, so they will not be quite as metallic, but it's been my experience that even though they're not quite as metallic, they definitely still whatever that is, register as metallic once the matte medium dries. And if I wanted to punch it up a little bit, I actually have this paint in a container. I could always grab a little out, but I like a very classy kind of muted appearance to things. So for me, I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so what I was started to say before that was that this is kind of busy and I didn't end up really focusing on it. So what I'm actually going to do is just use paint to kind of camouflage it a bit. This paint is really dry already. So I'm actually going to pull this clip off for a moment. And as you can see, I've already glued that page together. So I'm just going to use this to kind of help camouflage that area a little bit, and I don't have any white. Let me get some white. And some of this lovely burnt sienna. All of the paint that I put out just in this little bit of time is completely drying out. So I'm just going to add water, spritz some water over all of it. So now I have the burnt sienna, and I'm bringing it in intentionally right here because that piece is coming over her hair there, and it looked a little, a little strange all on its own there. So by bringing in the burnt sienna, it will hopefully kind of feel incorporated a little more into the piece, or into the page, I guess. It'll make sense that it's there when I'm done. So now I'm just going to paint around this cable box here. As best I can with this big old brush. That's something to point out too, is I'm using a really large brush, and a lot of people might think, oh, it's such a big brush for such a small area. It is very important that you use as large of a brush as you can, especially when you're being a little bit abstract with what you're doing, because it helps you to not over control. I'm going to take the baby wipe that I've got. I'm just going to move to a different area, and I'm just going to soften a few of the edges and then use it to help create a little bit of texture, and maybe even just wipe away some paint with it. There we go. That looks good. And then I think I'll just kind of come in and put just a tiny bit of orange down here, and use my fingers to just kind of get this messy but blended appearance. So now I'm going to come over to this side, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on getting this a little darker. It's going to get muddy. I'm happy with that. I don't know how many times I can say that. I think people think that that's a bad thing, and so I talk about it a lot because it's not a bad thing. It's a really good thing to have things that feel a little bit flat and a little bit more natural. And I'm going to rinse my brush just so I can get the Payne's Gray out. I think you get those lovely muted and somewhat important in-between colors. Everything can't be full spectrum bright all the time. And that's what I think a lot of people are making the assumption, that you need everything to be pure color, rich, bright, pure color. But the problem, if you don't ever knock down any of your colors, then everything is full on, so to speak, all the time. So I like to kind of knock down my colors a little bit. So I'm just coming in here and making this all look a little more painterly and a little more intent, or with a little more intent. And again, if you get into an area where you don't like your edges, you can use your fingers. Feel free to use your fingers to help you with softening out your edges. So I've got this area up here that's bright white. I have a purpose for that intentionally, so I'm going to leave it alone. I've also got little bits of bright white in here. I'm going to leave them there, and that, I promise it'll make sense eventually. So I'm going to add a little light over here, because it's kind of, it gets a little out of the color scheme, and I want to try to pull it back. So adding some of the more saturated colors will help to do that. And then, of course, like I said before, try to carry everything down if you have a break. So I'm just going to pull it in. Now this is really brightly saturated, so what I'll do is I'll add a little white, which is going to dull the color down, and then I will add, I'm going to go with the burnt sienna to help kind of dull it down just a little bit. And then I've incorporated, kind of try to incorporate some of those squares, but I'm going to leave them alone. Other than that, pop in a little I love brush strokes. I hear a lot of people say they don't like brush strokes. I can't even fathom not liking brush strokes and being a painter. I mean, I've heard painters say it. I know there are people out there who feel that way. I just can't imagine it. I love painterly um, brush strokes and pages and things. And they're fun too because they make a nice hook that you can use later to draw and doodle with. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now I have this small area here, and like I said before, use the size brush that you need. When you get into a small area, you can go a little smaller. It's, not a bad thing. So I'm just going to come in with the bright orange, but I'm going to do it kind of in the center of it. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to dull it down towards the color that's up here. Actually, I need to fix that. I got a big chunk here. So right here, I'm going to finish it out. This is that kind of that concept I was talking about with carrying it through. So I'm going to bring this color down here. And then over when you get to this side, it's kind of pushing more into the yellow. So I'm just going to rinse that lightly. I'm not getting all the color out, and I'm going to pick up some yellow. So I should have kind of an orangey yellow here. So now I've kind of carried that through. In fact, I'm going to even do a little more up here. And so then this area here, you can do a variety of things. I'm just going to use my fingers to smear all of this together. So now it really kind of feels like it was meant to be there to begin with. And then for this area here, I think I'm going to go into some of this burnt sienna. And I'm just going to get my stencil back out and see if I can figure out. I think that was made by something along the lines of that, or close to anyway. So I'm going to just finish out this circle here. So I'll just do it and then you'll know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to finish out just this one circle. It's going to go into her eye. It's awesome, fine, no problem. It's going to go right over top of the, oops, I went under it. It's going to go right over top of the bookshelf even a little bit. And then I'm going to take something else. In this case, I'm going to use white because I really want these to feel like they go together. And I'm going to do yellow because yellow is a little different. And you can see I'm mixing less and less each time so that it's sitting kind of on the surface of it. So I'm going to get that paint off. There you go. So now it feels like it's a design feature instead of an accident. See how I did that? Did you see what I did there? All right, so I'm going to actually just kind of cheat and repeat that yet again. And this time I'm just going to do slightly different colors, and I'm just going to use my finger because it's faster. And get that wet, which will help it to move around. Now there's plenty of color still on it from before. And so there we go again with the making mud idea. And I'm just going to do white into this. And I can't remember who, someone on YouTube has been talking about this color called like Celadon or something like that. And I find you can make it pretty easy by mixing the very colors that I'm using today. I don't know why that is, but so I'm going to pop this yellow, I'm trying to leave it kind of bright. May have to add a little white. There we go. So I'm going to lift that. Oops, made a big mess because of all the spritzing water on there. I don't want to put the stencil down into that, but I want to put another one also coming up over here, the hair. So this time I'm just going to use orange and whatever is already on it. And then I'm going to go and put the dark color in the center. There we go. Cool. Okay, so hopefully this kind of gives you guys an idea of how it all happens. I'm just cleaning my stencil off. And this baby wipe that I'm really beating up like crazy, I will save it and use it unless I dig too many holes. Like I've dug quite a few holes here, but this is how I got that other colored paper. This is how I end up making it. I don't make it on purpose. I make it as part of my process, but I use it. And so like this is my paint rag where I just cleaned that stencil off. So that's an awesome mark that I might not otherwise have made. So I probably will keep that too. I don't have to buy a lot of paper, I can tell you that. So at this point, what would I normally do? I'm going to show you a trick, and after I show you that trick, then I'll probably just go ahead and go back to, I'll turn the video off and just go back to working in my journal. This is a necklace, not a top, so I want to give her a top. Otherwise, it will look like it's the collar of a top, of like a dress or a shirt or something. So I'm going to give her a little top, and then let's see. I think I will do a little bit of drawing on it, and I really like to create big like floral patterned clothing. I don't wear necessarily a lot of patterns, but I like to draw people wearing patterns. It's funny. So I'm just going to do some random floral type of thing. And I'm going to play the game that I like to play, which is to make things a little bit surreal, or have things work in a way that they don't in real life. So the bottom of this cabinet is here. Just going to make it darker so you can see it. So that's kind of the bottom of my cabinet, and I'm just going to carry the pattern from her shirt. Now, of course, you don't get the, more than just a single petal each time, just because of the small area. But when I paint it, it will all have the same kind of color. And her shirt obviously shouldn't do that unless maybe she had her arms sticking straight out. But that's the kind of stuff I really enjoy. I get a kick out of it, so to speak. Now, I do feel like this area is still a little disjointed, but I have a trick for that. So I'm going to pause this video. I'm going to let this dry. It probably won't take but about, not even 5 or 10 minutes, because the trick that I want to do, it definitely needs to be dry for that to work. And by dry, I mean both the acrylic paint. Look, I've completely glued this whole thing together. Oh, so funny. I'm also going to rescue my paper. All right, I will be back in a bit. Okay, so we're back. This is pretty dry. There's a few spots where I can tell it's still damp, but for the intents and purposes that that I'm interested in working with it, it's dry enough. So I remember I told you that I love my baby wipes, and I love them for a multitude of reasons, not just acrylic paints and that type of thing. Now I make my own spray inks. This is just a bottle from the dollar store basically, and I make them with either acrylic inks or watercolor. This particular one I think is acrylic ink and water, and I use them in a variety of ways. So this over here is my ink palette, and I'm just going to pour a tiny bit of this out to use with a paintbrush. And I'm going to get a small round paintbrush. And what I'm going to do now, even though the cabinet that I was drawing from was this shiny bright red, I'm going to make the outer frame of this aqua green color. Now I think I mentioned in the earlier part of the video that I lost my train of thought. Oh, that's terrible. I'm showing my age, aren't I? Oh, that I was going to leave the white spaces white for now, all the little places where I missed getting paint, where I left background showing. So like if you're painting on a canvas or something and you end up having bits of white showing, it can represent light, which is a good thing, especially for watercolor. It's a good thing to be able to have areas that aren't fully painted. But when you're working with something and you don't want it to represent light, I'm going to go ahead and paint these little flowers. I probably could do this off camera because it's going to take a bit, but I'll just chat at you while I'm doing it. But if you don't want it to represent light, if you need it to, you need to represent something else, then I'm going to paint a couple of different leaves. I'm going to show you a little trick here. As I keep painting with it, I'm just going to dip into a little bit of water, and that's going to thin out the color so that when I paint this leaf or petal or whatever it is, which is right beside another one, it won't be as dark. So then I'll go on and use up this color so that I've got some light ones and some dark ones. So I'll use that up, and then I'll go back and straight into the paint. So now it's going to be much darker. So I'll come in and paint this one much darker. So there you can see how it transitions. That's just a little thing that you do most often in watercolor. So I'm going to get some more of these, and then I'm going to dip into water. I just kind of dip the very end of it into water and then just kind of let that water roll around a little bit inside of the brush. Okay, so, well, I'm not done. I just can't seem to stop, can I? And then I think I'll hit, whoops. I think I'll make these turquoise as well, just for fun. All right, so back to my point as to why I started showing you guys this. I'm going to take this somewhat dry now baby wipe and my sprayer, and I'm going to spray directly into it. I'll do it up here so you can see. I literally just kind of hold it against it and spray into it. Now that area is saturated with ink, and I can come in. It can be lighter or darker. And I just kind of look around for any of those areas. Whoops. And I do kind of get it everywhere. That's fine with me. You can also, this also will just tint anything. And if you had a more wet baby wipe, you could wipe it back up again. This baby wipe is so dry that I kind of can't really use that to my advantage. Let's see, is that pretty much everything? I think that's pretty much everything. And I'm going to go ahead and just give her blue hair. I'll probably alter that though. I'm going to use it nice and wide to get the large areas. And then I'm going to make it a lot smaller. This is why I say a baby wipe is practically like a brush. It's like your own custom brush, because you really can make it any size and shape you need it to be. Okay, so like I said, I probably will paint this hair a different color, or at least play with it a little bit. But for now, for the camera, I'm getting hungry, so I'm going to stop. Also, too, this didn't quite take it, the color. It may very well have gel medium there or matte medium there, so I can just come in and paint it. Normally I do this trick with paint because paint will resist the ink, and so then I'm just darkening it up here because I want the effect of that. And then you can just, do any touch-ups. But I'm going to stop. I hope this was, in some way informative, helpful, kind of give you an idea as to how I work. I absolutely will come back in more than likely and continue to sketch and draw on this page and just work with it until I'm completely done. I feel like this area is a little heavy and busy. So I may come in and just soften that out, maybe just introduce some paint to that type of thing. So it's definitely still a work in progress, but at least it kind of gives you an idea of how I actually work, because I know that a lot of the time what you see are just, like sped up versions of me working, and they have a tendency to have a little bit of a different feel because I don't want to spend all the time doing all of my little doodles and stuff like that. But this is how I kind of actively do work in my journal, and the thought process behind the different things that I sketch and stuff, it is very happenstance. I will pull up on my phone, like, I'll show you really fast. So like I'll pull up my Instagram if it ever reloads. Just waiting. Right now it has my own, it had my own thing on it, so, and it's not loading. So I'll just pull up my Instagram and I'll scroll through it. And what I'm looking for and how I use it is I'm looking for something to spark inspiration. So for instance, I might come to this and I might see the little curves of that leaf. Hopefully, there you go. You can see a little better that way. I will, maybe I will draw that, or maybe I'll see the little ferns in the background and that'll inspire me. Or maybe I'll see this fence with the lines and I'll draw something that has those lines in it. So I'm not using it to copy someone's photo or someone's art. Like maybe I'll see this and I'll see the color combination of the tiny little lines. So I'll use those. Maybe I will get inspired and think, oh, I'm going to put a thumb up somewhere. I'm not going to draw this person's graphic or anything, but maybe, if it was to apply, I would do a thumbs up somewhere. Maybe I'd be inspired to do a windmill type of thing like that, just because I saw it in a photo. I will do that with Instagram. I will do that with Pinterest. Sometimes I'll even do it with my Facebook feed. And it's just, if you're sitting there and you want to doodle, you want to sketch, you're working in your journal, but suddenly you can't think of anything that you want to draw. It's a good way to get a little pop of something that inspires you and gets you started with drawing something in your journal. So it doesn't always have to be like, it doesn't always have to make sense. It doesn't always have to be something that's actually in your real life, which is, a lot of the times what I do. But sometimes it can just be a little spark of inspiration, like this little bookcase was. All right, that's it. Thanks so much. I really am actually going to go now. Thanks for watching.